So how's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another video. So as we get closer to the release day of Marvel's Avengers, we have been just receiving tons of new information. Yesterday I talked about how the developers have been a bit more vocal in the community, and they've been doing a lot of different question and answers on the Discord and on the subreddit and stuff. So today I'm going to go over one of the latest Q&As that they did. Someone on Reddit was nice enough to break down everything and put all the questions and answers together in one post. So I went through and picked out some of the most interesting tidbits that I saw. Now, a lot of the answers were pretty vague. There was a lot of dodging questions and stuff because people were asking about like future DLC and stuff that the developers aren't really allowed to talk about just yet. So a lot of the questions were kind of danced around and they were just kind of vague. So I just sort of went through and picked out the ones that I found most interesting to save you guys the time of, sitting there and reading through all of it. So we actually did find out a pretty decent amount of new information regarding just, the story, things that they're working on and whatnot. So getting right into it, the first question that was asked was, is there anything you're working on that you could share? And then the developer's response was, sure, why not? Mostly the team is working on optimizations in Warzone, trying to get the best frames per second / enemy counts we can. We know it's important. This question was actually brought up a number of different times, and the developer basically said this in a number of different ways, that they are trying to fix the frames per second. That was one of the biggest concerns in the beta. That was one of my personal biggest concerns, was that the frames would drop tremendously in certain parts. If there was like more than 10 enemies on screen at a time, the frames would just drop so bad that sometimes it would just completely crash the beta. So I'm glad to see that they are working on this. They are well aware of the frame problem. They're trying their best to optimize it, and hopefully by the time the game is finally released in maybe a couple weeks or a month afterwards, they squash most of those bugs. But because nobody wants to play a game where the frame rate is horrible. I mean, it just basically becomes unplayable at that point. So he did put a pretty big emphasis in a number of different questions on this thread about how they are working on the frames per second. So that's really good news. And then the second question is, can you elaborate more on how multiplayer works right off the bat? Will we be able to play as all 6 characters at the start, or will we have to unlock them in the story still? So this is actually a really good question. I was wondering this as well. I didn't know if we had to play through the story to unlock every individual character. But the answer is depends on how you play. If you follow the campaign, then yes, you have to unlock them because they are missing at the beginning. You can go straight into Avengers Initiative multiplayer as long as you're okay with spoilers, and all heroes will be available, provided they aren't dead or anything. So that's pretty cool. If you want to skip the story for some reason, maybe it's just not your thing, maybe you find the dialogue cringy or you're just not interested in the story, you can just go straight to multiplayer and just start leveling up your heroes, which that's awesome. Maybe I want to play the story mode for a little bit, take a break, play some multiplayer. Maybe I want to play some harm rooms. I like that they have that option. I like that the multiplayer is separate, because based on that beta alone, a lot of people didn't like the 3 story missions you had to do to unlock the multiplayer. So I have a strong feeling that a lot of people are probably just going to skip the campaign and go straight to multiplayer. So at least that option is there for those that don't want to play the story. So I think that's pretty cool. And then here's another question, kind of similar to the one previously. It says, does that mean that players will be able to skip all of the campaign? And then the developer said, I don't recommend it, but you can if you choose. You can always go back though. So yeah, you can sort of pick and choose. You can play all multiplayer. You can choose the campaign. They're not tied into one another exactly. So that's pretty neat. And then this next question is kind of related to the story. It's kind of related to future content. They said, could we ever see Wolverine in the game? And then they said, we got 1 million requests for the X-Men. You'll have to hear what we have come up with. Smiley face. So this to me kind of stands out more than some of the other questions because he wasn't as vague. Normally when people ask about future content, he just says, I'm not allowed to say anything, or he would just completely dodge around the question. I mean, here he just says, we've got 1 million requests, and then he adds a smiley face at the end. I mean, to me, that's kind of hinting at the fact that we might potentially see some X-Men content. He could have just straight up said no, or just dodged the question like he did a million other times. I mean, I could be looking too far into this, but the fact that he went a little bit more in detail with this answer stands out to me for some reason. So I would be okay with X-Men as future content. I think Wolverine, for example, would fit in perfectly with the way that this gameplay works and this fighting style and the fight mechanics. I think he'd fit right in. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see. And then next up, it says, I'll put it simple, war zones equal online, does campaign equal online? So can you basically play this with your friends is the question. And he says, no, the campaign is principally single player with just a few exceptions. So unfortunately, it doesn't look like you can play the campaign with your friends. It's just going to be strictly single player. I would have at least liked the option to play co-op with my friends. I mean, it does say a few exceptions, so who knows what that means. But honestly, I'm fine if it's single player. I mean, the story mode doesn't need to be multiplayer since they have like 80 plus Warzone missions and they have raids and they have all kinds of things to do with friends. So it's not the end of the world if you can't play the campaign with multiplayer. And then this question is in regards to the raids. It says, I don't think this has been asked yet. Will raids have anything to do with the campaign story, or is it a separate thing entirely? And then the answer is, that's a great question. The short answer is yes, they are story related. So I don't know how they're going to tie the raids into the main story. Maybe you do a mission in the campaign and maybe you spare an enemy and then maybe that enemy pops up later in the raid. Maybe the raids have to do with something that happens after you beat the story mode. I don't know, but it is cool to see that the raids at least have some sort of plot behind them. It's not just an enemy and you have to go out and kill them. So I like the fact that they're giving the raids a little bit of lore. And then next up, this question has a lot to do with the beta. Hey, is there any chance we could get a way to set which takedowns our heroes do? I've seen that there are more than 2, yet I seem to only get the 2 of them like 99% of the time. And then the response was, that's something that we are talking about. So they're at least aware of this. This is a problem I noticed in the beta, is just, I mean, I like doing the finisher moves. They look really cool and it feels powerful, and I mean, who doesn't like to pull off a finisher? But it was kind of the same 2 animations. I noticed this really bad with Black Widow. She would just do the same 2 animations on loop over and over and over. So it got kind of repetitive. I mean, you're fighting just waves and waves of enemies and you're doing the same move every single time. So I hope that they do add more variations to the executions and stuff. At least that they're talking about it and they're aware of the issue. So hopefully they add more in future content down the road. Now this question I found, it was pretty interesting. It says, as we've seen that there is a space mission, will we spend a long time in space or no? And then the response was a little time, probably more often later on. So that's definitely interesting. Who knows what that means? Maybe there's like a raid set in space or certain missions or Warzone set in space. I'm all for space missions. There's like endless possibilities with space stuff. Maybe we get some future aliens in DLC. Some sort of alien creatures or something. That sounds like a blast to me. I'm glad they're switching it up and not all the same war zones take place in the same exact areas. So fingers crossed in a future DLC update that they add some sort of space combat. Now this one's got me pretty excited. They said, will Hulkbuster have outfits and will we have skills to make him stronger and last longer? And then the response was, skills yes, outfits not sure. So I had no idea that Hulkbuster was going to have his own skills. In the beta, you couldn't customize the Hulkbuster at all when you were Iron Man. You just deployed him, and then you had your set skills, and you had like 3 or 4 different combos you could do. And Hulkbuster was really fun, and he could pull off some pretty cool combos. But the fact that it's got his own skill tree, I'm assuming like once the final game's unlocked and you get to like the master skill tree for Iron Man, it probably has some different perks for the Hulkbuster. I hope that it can definitely last longer, and I hope that there's some really cool moves that you can actually do. And I hope that the Hulkbuster kind of has his own like mini skill tree, because I would love to deck out Hulkbuster. I like getting out of it and letting my friends use him whenever. All around, I think the Hulkbuster is really cool, and I'm super excited to find out that he's got his own skills as well. And then next up, it says, will there be a mission ending timer so we can collect the loot that fell before departing to the Quinjet? And then the response is, you won't lose anything. Leftover loot gets sent to your bag post mission if you missed it. So this is a huge deal. A lot of people were worried about just not collecting their loot. I know sometimes during missions you'll find like a rare boss just around the battlefield that drops like a legendary piece of gear or whatever. I know when I was playing the beta, I killed one of those bosses and he dropped legendary gear, but it fell through the map, and I was just worried that I wasn't going to get that. So this is good, and it's reassuring to know that if you do lose any loot and it just falls on the ground or something, or it gets lost for some reason, it will show up in your inventory after the fact. packed, so you're not going to really miss out on anything. And then the final question, which is pretty straightforward, it's in regards to, you know, losing loot and stuff and how loot works with loot chests. They said, dang, we need a ping system to ping those chests. And then the response was, yeah, we're looking into that for post-launch. So they are aware of people wanting a ping system. They also said that they're looking at adding a mini-map for the post-launch content. Based off of the feedback of the beta, it's kind of hard to keep track of your teammates, and it's hard to see like who's looking at what. So they definitely need a pinging system. I agree. They need the ability to say, hey, let's all attack this enemy at the same time, or hey, here's a loot chest, or let's go over here. That way it's easier to communicate with your teammates. Unfortunately, they don't have this at launch, but I do hope that they add this in a future update. I think that would be a great quality of life change, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But that is going to do it for this video, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If it helped you out, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit the bell for notifications. I will be covering a ton of Avengers content going forward on this channel. I'm super excited for this game. I hope it does really well. I really hope that this game is as good as I hope it is. I just really hope that they overcome those bugs and those glitches and stuff that were in that beta. But it does look like that they are working on those, so fingers crossed. But if you haven't yet, follow me on Twitch at SwannyPlaysGamesLive and be sure to join the channel's Discord. Those links are found in the description down below. And that is going to do it for me, everyone, and I will talk to you all in the next video.